Hello and welcome. If you are new here, my name is Drew, and if you are not new here, then welcome back. And in this video, I'm going to discuss the high school graduating class of 2020 and some interesting behaviors and numbers associated with this group, where many are wondering if this is considered a lost generation due to the COVID pandemic. Now, there were a few articles that discussed this, and when we're talking about hard numbers, according to the National Student Clearinghouse, the class of 2020, the percentage of students who enrolled in college immediately after graduating from high school was 53.5%, which was down 7% compared to the class of 2019. Now, many point to COVID being this issue, and when you try to simplify that, that's really about 1 in 8 students, and even more so if you are coming from what is considered a high poverty school, it's more about 1 in 15. And so there's a lot of head scratching going on as to why this is and what's happening. And there was a slight increase of students who did eventually enroll from that class, but it was really not significant, and the majority ended up enrolling in 2-year institutions compared to 4-year institutions. Now the question is, rather, they are considering this a lost generation because there was a slight uptick when compared to enrollment numbers of the class of 2022. So you did see a slight rebound, but you still had that dip from the class of 2020, and they just didn't come back, or they just didn't come into a higher education in pursuing that. And it's interesting because this group is also being considered Gen P, and the advisory group, EAB, has described them as highly undersocialized, academically underprepared, and very concerned about mentally being able to go to college. And interestingly, it was also added that Gen P is just craving in-person events and experiences. And if they are going to attend digital experiences, then they have very high standards for the quality of that. So when I think about enrollment numbers with Gen P and also how EAB described them and those attributes, 2 things come to mind. One, let's focus on those attributes. Because of those students who did go through COVID, because I think this is representative of a much larger population of students who will be entering college who experienced some form of virtual learning through their K through 12 experience. And we have seen, and I've talked about this in other videos, we have seen some gaps in some foundational knowledge that is starting to catch up to them as they come into their college classes. This is also something that I am experiencing in my own sphere of influence in my career as well. And so for these students who are coming in with the ones who are highly undersocialized and they have, they're underprepared academically that I just mentioned, and they also have craving for in-person experiences, I think this is important to take note of if you are someone who works directly with students, especially if you're someone who creates programming in some sort of engagement or retention area, or even if you are working in an advising capacity and you're trying to get students to meet with you in person. I know I've had personal experience with students who they wanted to meet virtually out of convenience, but the challenge was these conversations were better suited to be in person because there were some heavy topics involved and there was some tough coaching involved. And so it just was not the same. And it was even worse if they had poor internet, because you would try to hammer home a point or it would get very emotional, and then you or the student would end up freezing, and then it would kind of just kill all momentum and really make the conversation weird in general, and you sort of lost your point. And so I find that interesting, considering, it's understandable then that Gen P is wanting high quality virtual experiences. So that's something to take into consideration, because they do have their advantages for the sake of convenience in trying to reach a wider audience if students cannot just walk across campus to the in-person event. But I also want to hammer home that it is important to do in-person events because students are craving this, and ironically, they're also under-socialized. So now you have this challenge of, how do I get these under-socialized students to my event, because then they will be able to be more comfortable and start to develop those social skills and then grow from there and potentially lead into the classroom experience in terms of academic preparedness. So if you do work with students, that's very important to take note of with this generation. And I expect to see this with future graduating classes as well, as they begin to enroll in college. Now, on the flip side, which comes back to the point of these articles and the point of this video is the declining numbers of that class and how they did not eventually enroll as much as other classes have done or what they're expected to do. So this is important, and I think this underscores an enrollment issue in a sense that we are already witnessing declining enrollment nationwide. And so if we talk about Gen P as potentially being a lost generation, why are we? And this kind of digs into my personal recruitment philosophy, and that is the students are out there. Just because they did not enroll at the same cadence as other graduating classes does not mean that they are not interested in pursuing higher education. And also with my personal philosophy is I don't believe that just because you exist as an institution that students will come to you. I think you need to go get those students. Even the ones who are interested in attending your institution and plan on it, you still need to go get them. And I think this is very important when we're talking about the class of 2020. They are out there, and if you do have the resources, that's always a barrier, but if you do have the resources, you need to go find them. You can do targeted campaigns, you can do targeted marketing, targeted recruitment, and you can at least get a handful of them to come back and enroll. And the benefits of this are twofold. First, from an institutional perspective, that improves your enrollment, yes. But on the other hand, that serves the purpose of your existence, is you're finding students who at one point or another probably considered pursuing higher education in terms of socioeconomic mobility. And because of the pandemic and remote learning and probably some sour experiences and lack of support, they have since drifted away from that. So by going out and getting them and bringing them back into what they had originally planned, you are now contributing to their growth and the community's growth and their own journey into becoming a productive worker in the workforce. And so maybe some schools are doing this, and it's also very tricky to get that data and to find out where they are and what they're doing, because some may have found jobs and they may be comfortable, and that's okay, because again, college is not for everyone. But for the ones who decided not to go and are lost and still don't know what to do, they are on an island. They are cut off from any sort of support from their high school or from any institution of higher education, from a push-pull of pushing to go to college or the college is pulling them to attend. So someone needs to go get them. Someone needs to find them. So this is interesting. It's an interesting topic, and I think it's also interesting we're honing in on the class of 2020, because I think we will find more classes, graduating classes like this. And I'm curious to see if this conversation about trying to recruit them back into higher education expands or becomes more common. So that's all I have for you in this video. If you liked it, there's that like button that you can always hit. And if you want to see more content like this or stay up to date on what's going on in higher education, then make sure you hit subscribe. And as always with that, I will catch you in the next one.